So going back to the home area to put out some final thoughts. So this game, I've been covering this game off and on throughout nearly 3 years, I think, if my math is correct. Because this game came out in February of 2018, I do believe. And the last update for this game came out in either January or February of last year, I think. Yes. Correct me in the comments if you have that information. But either way, I've been covering this game for a very long time, and I just haven't put my final wrap up on it and finish up this project. And I really wanted to finish this one up because it was outstanding, and I wanted to finish it before I start something new with Alien Isolation in a few days, depending on when I actually record that and upload that. So with this game, over the whole 2 years or just about 3 years of me covering this game is really hit and miss in many regards. I think the gameplay of it is really good. And also the thrill of farming the various weapons is also very intriguing, because the way that they did it have made it so that as long as the drop rates aren't like super incredibly low like it is with the swords in the Abyssal Dungeon, I think they have like really stupidly low drop rates. But either way, with this, not only do you want a legendary version of that item, but you also want it to have good modifiers on it to actually make it good. And this weapon right here is actually one of the best assault rifles from what I understand, at least with crit damage and critical rate. If you get high enough bounty, which is basically you get bounty by just playing the game, you can get stuff that has like really, really high critical damage and critical rate of like 50%, I think, or 60%. So that's how people make super OP weapons and whatnot. And obviously I haven't gotten to that point. As much as I enjoy this game, I don't know, I just kind of feel like it's not really a game that I could play for hours on end while having fun, if that makes sense. Like, if I am playing this game for hours on end, I'm probably grinding something, and it gets old, like, within playing, like, much more over an hour, I would say. With that being said, though, the storyline of this game is really what disappointed me the most. The main story of this game, while it set up a lot of potential with adding the new characters like Kureha, Itsuki, and Zaliska, they really didn't seem to know what they wanted to do with the whole thing. And adding Kirito mode in there as kind of like a mandatory fan service of showing Death Gun and everything, it just didn't really add anything to the game. And if you skipped it, you wouldn't really be missing anything. Like, that part of the game is so forgettable. When I thought about doing a review, an official review of this game, I almost completely forgot that part of the game even existed, to be completely honest, because it is just so forgettable, honestly. And the really big shame of it is that if they would have waited just a few months, I think 3 months, until their first DLC, I think their first DLC added the Bullet of Bullets add-on. And as I said before, the way that they did Bullet of Bullets in the simulations, they did a really good job on simulating what it's actually supposed to be. And Although I kind of wish that they had a little bit more map variety, especially on the final stage. Like, only having the Forgotten Woods as the only stage is kind of disappointing. But comparing that part of the game, an optional bullet to bullets simulation compared to the Kirito mode, it is leaps and bounds better than what the main game had. Like, the main game had, you fight, I think, 3 different people on the exact same area, and then you fight Deathgun, and then that's it. Like, it just felt like an arena thing, but then there was no map variety at all, and the whole bullet to bullets thing is where you're fighting, especially on the last stage anyway, where you're fighting a ton of people at one time, and having it confined to a really small area that you've already fought people in, and then having Deathgun being the only thing there is, well, was really disappointing. And I was kind of hoping that this game would really try to do something unique with a lot of this stuff, especially considering how the Gainverse games have been a bit different from the anime counterpart. And I really wish that they tried to do something more of their own thing, or have better explanation for stuff. But they just didn't. They just kind of like copied the anime for that part of the game. For the rest of the main story, it was just kind of upgrading your Arphasis, and then at the very end, where you unlock Kirito mode, you have his side story, and then the part of the main character, it just, you have to take a lot of stuff at face value for it to even remotely work. Like, for the Nerve Gear helmet, with assuming that all of the characters know what the Nerve Gear does, or at least I think Nerve Gear is the name. The helmet, yeah. Assuming that they know what it does, you get one of these from a stranger, and then he says, "Oh, put it on, fight me, or else I'll go after people you know." Well, first of all, why would you do that? Why would you put it on? There's literally no reason for you to put it on, because number one, that means even if he's telling the truth, you die in real life anyway. But then, if you are in the game, and then the person actually wanted to do something, there's one less person that can make a difference in the world to avert that situation in the first place. So there's a lot of problems with that. And then Itsuki is kind of a really big disappointment as well. He was set up as this guy that really had trust issues, and he kind of wanted to show the main character not to be as trusting of other people, or at least in GGO, because of how people in GGO are. And I thought that was really good. And if he was just this guy that kind of was like that person who was reasonable and realistic, that could have worked well. But then they wanted him to be, it kind of sounded like in some of the cutscenes, him being obsessed with the character as well as being the villain at the end. And I thought that was kind of a slap in the face to what he set up at the beginning of the game. So there is that. And then Zaliska, I think I didn't really have any issues with. I think she was fine. And then Kureha is, I think she was okay, but the way that they had her character progress just wasn't really well executed. And everything. So I think they probably should have focused on, well, Kureha, like, she was, because of her skills in GGO, she probably would have thought that GGO is what made her stand out. But then with the main character progressing as fast and catching up to her so fast, she kind of loses her outstanding trait in that way. I think that would have made a little bit more sense. I mean, I think that's kind of what they tried to do, but it just wasn't executed very well. And everything. So there's that. The main story was just a mess. I think out of all of the story content in this game, the main story was the most disappointing. The DLCs, however, I think DLC 1, where they showed like the kind of past selves of some of the characters, that opened up a lot of opportunities, and I think they did really well with the story aspects of those DLCs. Of that DLC in particular. But then they had Levere kind of be like, oh, well, I just used your last data and whatever for my own purposes, for experiments, I guess. I mean, as much as I like Levere as a character, I just think that was kind of a missed opportunity, that they could have really went more in depth with the past selves of these characters instead of being like, oh, well, it was just for this other character's means. Or at the very least be like, oh, well, she's an enemy of Glocken or whatever. So I think that one was kind of hit or miss. And also the DLCs just kind of like made you roam around and only do one extra dungeon, I think, and then that's it. Maybe 2 on one of them. And that was pretty disappointing as well, because there aren't a huge number of dungeons in this game, especially when it comes to optional ones. And so, when you're leveling up your character, you kind of have to do dungeons that you've already done in the main story multiple times in order to level up. Unless you're killing stuff in the field, I guess. So there's that. So I think the first 3 DLCs, I think they were alright. And the third DLC had the defensive battles, which was interesting, but executed very poorly, and it was very boring, to be honest. I thought my idea of how the defense battles could have gone would have been much better. Whereas the tank goes on a linear road, just like the bridge or whatever, but then you had a wide open field and then had like these camps or nodes that you had to either capture or defend while you're damaging the tank, or have those nodes like do something like buff you or something that would help you defeat the tank. Would have been much, much better instead of just having it on a linear track and then you just shoot a weak point for like 10-20 minutes. So that was really disappointing on that, and I thought it was okay as like a one-off thing, but doing it multiple times was just no. So then we come to, well, also I want to make a passing mention to Basalt Joe as well. In the story, he's pretty forgettable, honestly. Again, with the death gun part, when I thought about doing a review of this game, I almost forgot that this guy was there as well. I think his character is good, but they just really make you dislike him at the beginning of the game. So, like, by the time he joins your party, and you, if you even bother gaining affinity with him, and seeing his affinity cutscenes, at that point, I just didn't really care. So, even though that he's an alright character, like, his role in the main story, like, he's just kind of there, honestly. Like, they just didn't really do anything with his character that he really redeems himself to a point where I care about him. Like, well, his story is understandable, I think it's good, by the time you see his story, it's kind of difficult to care to the degree of actually wanting to gain further affinity with him, if that makes sense. So, with that, the 4th DLC was by far the best, the Dissonance of the Nexus. That DLC did basically what the main story, and, well, at least the main story should have kind of been like, in some regard. The story was really good, I think. And they did bring back Sachi, which I think is fine. It's kind of weird, but it's fine. If you like Sachi, I think she's an alright character, but having her come back after she was gone at pretty early in the anime is kind of weird. And they kind of explain as that she's kind of like an AI or ghost or program or something that has her memories and personality. So, I mean, it's not really Sachi, but for all intents and purposes it is. I think that was fine. But then I think, like, just the combination of the level design and how the story progressed, it actually made the Sword Art Online alternative cast, like Len and Fuka and all these characters, actually do something in the story. In the main story, I don't think they really do anything at all. They're just there for fan service, as well as having more characters to do stuff with. And they, as far as I know, they don't really even have affinity cutscenes. I think Len and Fuka technically do have one, but that's it. I don't think Pito, Hui, or M have one. Like, they have one, like, intro cutscene, and then that's it. So that was really disappointing. So they're just kind of there. Like, I mean, I'm glad that they're there, but you can't, by gaining affinity with them, you don't really have, like, in-depth or bonding time with them. And since they made it so that they're actually part of the main story in the Dissonance of the Nexus, I think they did a really good balance of having them in there, participate in the story, but not, like, completely take away from the narrative, if that makes sense. They kind of help, they help Seven out with something, with figuring out something, as well as Yuna, and I think that really worked well, because it gave them the spotlight on a bit of the story, but they still had, like, they had a main goal in mind and everything. And for the most part, the DLCs, or at least in some of the Sword Art Online games, do a decent job of doing that, where they have, like, the main story focus on the main cast, and then in the DLCs they focus more on the either original characters or side characters that don't get as much attention. And like I said, the flow of the dungeons in DLC 4 just feels so much better than the normal ones for some reason. I think the normal dungeons, or the first three DLC dungeons, and the ones in the main story, I think they're fine. I think they are good enough in their own right, but the DLC 4 dungeons, I don't know what it is necessarily, but they just flow so much better. And they actually are really fun to play over. For the other ones, like, it's alright, but in these DLC 4 ones, they really went above and beyond to make it feel good. And then the super bosses, the Snow Queen and the other one, I forget what the name that is, I think they were really well designed super bosses. they have specific mechanics that you have to watch out for, and I don't really think that you can cheese them necessarily very, very easily either. Well, unless you, of course, have character regen and avoid instant death and life recovery and whatever accessories that basically trivializes a lot of the game. But if you don't have those, their attacks are, for the most part, dodgeable, but they also have unique mechanics that I think really add to their combat capacity. Like, some of the previous bosses, they weren't incredible. They basically did their job, but they weren't really outstanding in any way, unless they were annoying to fight or took forever to kill, like the tank. If you don't have the specific explosive weapon, the Crimson Roar, I'll show you here. I have one that's really good. This one right here. If you don't have this weapon, defeating the tanks are just really annoying. And I mean, there probably is other weapons that work just fine, but this is one of the best weapons to kill them very quickly. Like, you can probably cut like a 10-15 minute battle to like a few minutes because of this thing. Because you're always dealing crit damage, because they have a weak point on the bottom that is weak to explosive damage, or it's just a weak point in general, but you can't really shoot it with normal weapons. You need to use an explosive weapon. And if you have weak spot damage and crit damage and everything, like, you can really take them out quickly. But yeah. So I think DLC 4 was basically, unfortunately, like what most of the game should have been, but they didn't get to that point until the end, unfortunately. And it sounds like this game did have like a studio transfer in the middle of its development, and that would actually make a lot of sense because of the really misjointed main story, as well as some of the other decisions. So overall, this game, I would say it's a fun game if you don't have a large number of games that you are playing right now. This game is a pretty good third-person shooter with an anime style. I mean, if you like Sword Art Online, it's obviously a bonus. But even with all the mechanics I do like, the story just really doesn't work very well. Or at least the second half of it. And then the first 3 DLCs, I think they're fine, but they aren't incredible. And then DLC 4 is really where it's really... They got something right in making it really incredible. So, if you've seen my past videos at all, or watched someone else's, and this game looks interesting to you, and you've done shooters before, give it a shot. It might just pique your fancy. So, my last thoughts here, before I end it, is that I want to give credit to all of the characters in this game. Like, they basically brought back every single game first character or original character from the games, because there are a few original characters in there, and they put it in this game with 2 exceptions as far as I'm aware. Well, actually technically more than that, I guess, if you count a few other ones. So you don't have Sumergi, however you say his name. from Lost Song, he's not in this game, and they don't have Tia in this game, which baffles me. And then they don't have, of course, Alicia, Rue, and Sakuya from Lost Song either, or Lux or anything. So like most of the Lost Song characters are not in this game besides Seven and Rain. And you get Seven right in the base game, but you don't get Seven until DLC 4, which is kind of interesting. But it is how it is, I guess. And one thing that really baffles me when talking about Tia is that the voice actress who does Premiere also voice acts Tia in Hollow Realization. So, and considering that Premiere and Tia look pretty much exactly alike, or at least they're younger versions, besides Tia having white hair, it just doesn't really make sense why they couldn't have added like 1 or 2 Affinity cutscenes, a date scene, and then had her in there. And the reason why I bring this up is that Tia is my favorite character from Hollow Realization. I think that, for me personally, her character is what brings Hollow Realization from a decent or a pretty good game to an excellent game. The DLCs for that game and having Tia's character development was the most satisfying parts of that game, I would say. But then they don't bring her back. And also, this is the only games where where all of the girls are not, well, I guess Rain and Seven aren't really like obsessed with Kirito, but this is the only game where someone else other than Kirito can finally date some of these characters. And I think that was a really good, well, I like the aspects of dating some of these characters and having a romantic relationship with them. So the fact that my favorite character is not in this game, and it is probably one of the only games where it would have had the opportunity to actually have a relationship with that character, that's pretty disappointing. But all of the other characters, you know, like a lot of people wanted Sumergi to come back. And I think he was an alright character. But he didn't really stand out to the extent of like Rain or Seven. So that's my opinion on him, but I wouldn't mind him coming back either. So that would be fine. And I think they did a really good job like on the personalities and affinity cutscenes for most of the characters. I really didn't like how pretty much all of the Sword Art Online characters that are in the anime, like all of the main characters, like you can't date them at all, which I guess is not really technically a big deal, but in my mind I'm kind of in the boat where Kirito should have Asuna and only Asuna, and since playing Alicization Lycoris, the game after this, it kind of gets old really quickly, where all of the characters kind of obsess over him, including characters that don't really make any sense, like Alice. Like, why? Like, you can't even give Yu-Gi-Oh! Alice? Or Taisei? You know? I don't know. It's not really a big deal, but it's just kind of... It's just something that I wanted to mention. So, overall, this game is good, but because of the main story in the game, it really struggles to become even close to a masterpiece. It definitely is not. It's just a decent third-person shooter that has some good fun mechanics in it that have Sword Art Online characters in it. And I guess you could really sum up the whole game like that. So overall, this project has kind of been really long and drawn out because of various things, and I really just kind of wanted to get it finished. And honestly, I don't know if I will really return to this game to really like go all out on its mechanics, especially considering that some of the games that I'm into now have like daily stuff that you don't need to do, but you really should do every day. So that takes up a lot of my time, and I kind of feel like, as fun as this game is, I would probably rather be doing something else, if that makes sense. So, with that, if you somehow stuck with me throughout all of these parts, I think I'm gonna split this episode into 2 parts for sure. Having the hardcore dungeons and whatever in one part, and then this one in another, because I know it's gonna be way too long otherwise. If you stuck with me throughout all of these parts, I really hope that you enjoyed, and I hope that I did a half decent job. And sadly, because I haven't been recording regularly, I kind of feel like my commentary hasn't really improved to the level that I want it to be in. But with that being said, though, this has pretty much been the only game where I really went all out on in showing all of the optional content. So, I mean, granted, I haven't actually showed a completion of the hardcore quest yet, if I'm ever going to do that, or finish the Bullet of Bullets Grandmaster at all, or anything like that. Like, there's still stuff I could technically do, but I've shown all of the optional Affinity cutscenes and all of the main story and DLC cutscenes and everything, and I hope that people enjoyed it. And this game has really taught me that I really do not like playing games. Well, I shouldn't say that. Let me rephrase that. I do not like recording a playthrough of a game that is as long as this one. Like, if it's over like 10 hours or 15 hours, it just gets way too long, and I get really burnt out on this stuff. And that is pretty much what happened with this game, as well as, I guess, not being 100% sure what I even want to do with it near the end here. But yeah, as misjointed as this game and my uploads with it has been, I really hope that people enjoyed it. And I hope that I can improve in the future on that. So, with that, it has been a really kind of a new journey type of thing, doing a blind run on a game like this. And sadly, it didn't pan out to be as good as I wanted it to be. Well, at least being pleasantly surprised with DLC 4. But with that, thank you very much for watching. Again, I hope that you have liked this series to its completion, and my commentary on it throughout these nearly 3 years. And with that, thank you very much for watching, and have a wonderful day.